This is Matthew, host of the Superhero Ethics Podcast, and I've got an ethical question for you. If I'm trying to help you not listen to ads, is it ethical for me to do an ad to help you do that? If you go to our website, theethicalpanda.com, and just click on the join button, for $5 a month, $55 a year, you get to hear all of our episodes without ads. Was I ethical in doing this? Let me know. Welcome to today's episode of Superhero Ethics. I'm Matthew Fox, your host, joined as always by my co-host, Riki. And today we're talking about Ironheart. We've been on a hiatus. This episode may actually come out in the middle of our hiatus because it's so topical. Depends how much time I get to do some editing. But Ironheart was a show that I was interested in, but there was a lot of other things going on. But Riki watched it, told me I needed to watch this. I watched it all last night and this morning. Did not disappoint, have a lot of thoughts on it. And Riki, I don't know if there's any way we can discuss this show without massive spoilers, because what we want to really focus on is a lot of the things that were spoiled, a lot of the things about where the character winds up, and questions about what that means in terms of what kind of show this was. So Riki, unless you think I'm wrong, I think we got to just start by saying, spoiler warning.
Yeah. Go ahead. What I'll say about the spoiler is, even if you're someone who's like, I don't care about the character Ironheart, like whether you spoil it or not doesn't matter. This has implications in the MCU as a whole. It's been something that has been theorized and discussed by fandom, and it's finally here. So if you are not just like interested in Ironheart, but kind of like an MCU fan, I think it's a big spoiler, and you may need to watch this show first. Yeah. That would be my take on it.
Yeah. So, as always, you're welcome to listen in if you're not interested in that, or if you just don't care that we're going to have some big spoilers, but it's going to be kind of the heart and soul of our discussion today. So, spoiler warnings in 3, 2, 1. The next time we see Dormammu, he should be in the visage of a red herring, because that's exactly what he was, because this wasn't a Dormammu show. This was a Mephisto show in the end.
Mephisto confirmed.
Confirmed. I've heard those words going all the way back to WandaVision.
Yeah.
And it's been kind of interesting for me as a non-comic book person. I had no idea who Mephisto was. And I remember I liked WandaVision a lot more than a lot of other people did, it seemed, because I didn't get wrapped up in, as the phrase that became very common, the Mephisto of it all. But time and again, so Riki is someone who was a Mephisto fan from the comics, who has gotten into the Mephisto of it all. What did it feel like to finally have that confirmed?
My wife and I, when the character showed up, we just like grabbed each other. We were like holding each other's hands and just like visibly shaking. And I was just like, say it, say your name. And when he finally said his name and said,
2 episodes later,
nice to meet you, Mephisto, I think we both kind of like happy scream, like, it's happened. It happened. Mephisto now, confirmed. It's wild.
Talk about from the comics, who is Mephisto?
The devil. I mean, you can tell from the name it's based on Mephistopheles, and then like the creators admit that, and in some incarnations, like I believe the Nick Cage Ghost Rider movies, they just end up calling him Mephistopheles for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But he is the Marvel devil. I mean, he's a big red guy with horns and fire and brimstone, and his powers are kind of unknowable.
Yeah.
In that sense, like he is similar to Dormammu, which you mentioned in the show Ironheart. They used as a red herring, like these powers come from Dormammu, which is interesting because in the comics, the Hood's powers do come from Dormammu, so they were being comic accurate there in the red herring.
And it makes sense because the characters who there's obviously a couple of like sorcerers who were introduced. Zelma, that's her name?
Zelma Stanton is the young sorceress.
Yep, Zelma Stanton and her mother. And, they are sorcerers using the same kind of magics that are used by Doctor Strange and others like that.
Yeah, her mother Sorry, her mother is Madeline Stanton, played by the incomparable Cree Summer, and she mentions that she was studying at Carmitage.
Right.
So she was on the path to becoming a sorceress, however far she got in, and then left in order to have her daughter Zelma and raise her.
Right. Exactly. And like, to me, it again makes sense of the, you know, the old saying of like, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If that's the world you live in, and you probably were studying sorcery around the time that some of the stuff with from the original Doctor Strange movie was happening, and Dormammu and all that, yeah, you hear about something from the dark dimensions, that's the first thing you think of. And so it felt earned as a red herring in that regard. It didn't feel like it was just a wild out of nowhere thing. It was like, that's the world she comes from. This is what she's been exposed to. And it being Mephisto instead felt like it made perfect sense.
Yeah, I may have to rewatch this again because it's unclear to me whether Madeline, the mother, knew whether it was Mephisto or not.
Right.
Because at that point they don't say, and then later Zelma's like, I did some follow-up research and it's Dormammu.
Right.
And then it's not, but maybe Madeline knew because she was afraid. And of course, like you could be you could be afraid of Dormammu. But I think if she recognized that it was actually Mephisto, it could make some sense.
Yeah. Well, and in whatever follow-up property we're going to get, you know, this ends with the Hood going to Zelma. And so I imagine Zelma and her mother are going to continue to feature in some way.
Yeah, well, Zelma is a prominent character in Strange Academy comic book series.
Okay.
And that is one of the titles that supposedly is an upcoming project. Of course, nice. With Marvel, we never know like whether something's actually going to get made or not, but that is the plan for that character. Okay. And yeah, it seems like the Hood will be involved in that. Mephisto is a prominent character in Spider-Man in the Brand New Day reset, which is the name of the upcoming Tom Holland Spider-Man movie. So now there's a lot of speculation, like, will they follow that comic book story faithfully? And like, will Mephisto be involved?
Right. And in the comics, important to note, given where Riri Williams goes by the end of this, Peter Parker is tempted by Mephisto at one point. A number of Miles Morales is, like a number of characters in comics have been. So it's not a huge thing. Well, it is a huge thing, but like Riri is not like the only one by any means. And we'll get to the questions about her heroism or what she is for sure. I just want to say something about Mephisto, though, because the show does a really interesting balance of science versus magic. And like the first 3 episodes are kind of much more about science with a little magic in the background, and then it flips the last 3 episodes. And I love the way those two are melded, and I want to talk about that in a second. But first, I am always as someone who comes from a theological background, I am Christian, and I'm very studied in Christian theology and mythology, but I'm also very progressive about it all, and I don't like the sort of push from some parts of Christianity to sort of ask media to take the stories of Christian mythology and make them real. Like, there really is a devil, and that should show up. God really is this, and St. Peter and Jesus and all that. And I have faith in those things, but to me that's very different than wanting them as like realities in our world today. I certainly don't believe in the devil necessarily, but that's a whole other question. And there's a couple of times where I've seen, and Supernatural I think is one example, where it feels like they're kind of saying Christian mythology is right. And they're kind of following some of those rules of like, this is literally Lucifer, this is literally the devil, etc. Or sometimes those characters are separate, but what have you. And I really like that here, and granted, I've not seen much of the comics. I only know what I saw in this show and in some of the few things people have told me about the comics. But it feels like the relationship between this and the Christian idea of the devil is very similar to Thor the character and the Norse mythological ideas of Thor the god. In that this isn't necessarily that the myth is true, it's saying that this is a real figure who exists in the world from some different dimension, and that just like Norse people encountered Thor and Odin in some form, and their mythology grew out of that. That peoples for whatever reason, in Mesopotamia or later parts of Judeo-Christian development, encountered this Mephisto figure and the very Christian idea of the devil, which is based in some other Abrahamic ideas, but is very much our current idea of it is very much a Christian idea. It comes about as an adaptation of that, as people experiencing Mephisto and then telling other people and then telling other people, and that getting into Mephistopheles, and that, of course, getting into the father of lies and John Scratch. Not John Scratch, something else Scratch. Like all the various names that are given to the devil.
Nicholas.
Nicholas Scratch, thank you. Which, also ties into Agatha All Along in a fun way. So yeah, I just, from that perspective, I really, really liked what they did, because they didn't do the thing of saying like, okay, all these mythologies are sort of true, but the Christian one is really true. It's just one more mythology based on some real things.
Yeah, I would say that Mephisto, the character, he's a deceiver. So anything he says could be a lie, but he basically claims to be like the devil of Christianity, or whatever right. theology. Like he will claim to be the evil in that,
right?
And whether that's true or not, or whether he was actually present like thousands of years ago to like influence humanity in this way, like it's open to interpretation. Like there's right. I don't think there's any actual confirmation. Like I said, he could just always be lying, but he does fit the visuals in the comics, at least. In Ironheart, he was played by Sacha Baron Cohen of Borat fame. But did you see the spoon?
Yeah, there's a reflection. He's reflected in a spoon at one point, and that's a much more red, traditional kind of like the devil image that I understand is what is in
Easter egg.
The comic books.
But yeah, I think I would say that I would not say that he is the devil, right? Like, I mean, we talk about it in that way, but I don't want this to be about like whether any religion is correct or not.
Right.
And I think Marvel in general, like in the comics, has been careful to toe that line. Like, obviously, like some people will be upset by this depiction. I know, like, I play a game on my phone called Marvel Strike Force, and the character of Mephisto is an unlockable, playable character in that game. And I have talked to players in the community who say, like, I don't want to play with that character. I choose not to play with that character because of my faith. And I think like that's perfectly reasonable. Like it is a very startling, comparison if you look at it. So it's up to you individually. I think as a entertainment industry, like Marvel and the MCU are like going to be very careful not to cross those lines if they can.
Yeah. And I really like what you said about him as the tempter, and that's going to get a lot into sort of the later part of this discussion about who is a hero, who is the villain, etc. I love that they portray him very clearly as he doesn't control people, he influences them, which again is in keeping with a lot of the stories of Satan or Lucifer, the devil, or whatever you want to call him. That it's the deceiver, he's not going to ever take someone over. I think the line actually is he doesn't possess, he influences.
Which to me all is those lines.
To me is a very damning line in a way, because if I am possessed, like I think we see Joe / Ezekiel / Zeke, there's a point to which he is literally possessed, at which the Hood is able to control the tech in his body and make his body do things he doesn't want to do. From what I see in this, Mephisto does not do that. Mephisto influences people. Mephisto manipulates people. Mephisto creates circumstances where people make the worst decision that they might make, but it's still a decision that they might make.
Yeah. And this is what is fascinating to me about this character as a villain, as an arch villain, is that unlike Thanos Doom, Kang, like all of these villains are like very powerful in like a physical, technological sense and can defeat the heroes with their weapons or their might. And they have like these drag out fights. I can't remember a Mephisto story where he actually fights anyone or like uses his like a beam of energy or anything, or like brimstone fire.
His red tail never comes out to hit someone. I love that.
Yeah. Because his power is like the whisper, right? That classical whisper from the movie The Witch, like, what dost thou desire?
Yeah.
And then he's going to give it to you, but in exchange. And this was, I thought it was notable that he did not use the word soul.
Not once.
And I felt like that was also another careful, like, we're tiptoeing around this line. When he makes a deal with the characters, they ask, well, like, what do you get out of it? And he says, I think the phrasing is like, nothing you'll miss.
Yeah. A teeny thing that you won't miss. Nothing you'll miss.
But obviously, like, we can tell from the context, like, he's taking their souls.
Right.
Like, that's what this character is.
Right. No, I think it's really interesting. And I think you're right. I like that it doesn't. People use the joke. Actually, let me ask you this. Had you heard the phrase before I started using it a bunch on this podcast? Angels dancing on a pinhead?
How many angels can dance on that pin? I've heard it. I can't remember how.
So it's a comment that's used to critique parts of theological debates and decisions where some schools, particularly in Christianity, but this can happen very much in Judaism and I think very much in Islam and probably also in a lot of other religions, can get very into debating the metaphysics of things. And so, like, just to give one example, in Judaism, I've been to, my father's family is Jewish, I've been to a lot of Passover celebrations, the Seder, and there's a whole discussion from the rabbis about, well, it says that God put out his hand, that when God put out his finger, it was 10 plagues. I'm getting the details of this wrong, I apologize. But then at one point it says God put out his hand, so does that mean it was 50 plagues? Because every finger is 10 plagues. Like, and the rabbis get very into the metaphysics of it. And part of the point of that story is that it's not a great idea to do that necessarily, but also that it's important to study these things and stuff. But that idea, especially in Christianity, but a lot of these things, is often kind of mocked, of like, the point isn't to figure out in physical detail, like, the point isn't to write the D&D stats of an angel. The point is to understand things can be beyond our comprehension, et cetera, et cetera. And so the statement is often like, you're arguing over how many angels dance on the head of a pin. And in the same way, like, I don't want to know Mephisto's stats. I don't want to know, like, because my first question is, if he starts using the word soul, my first question is, where does the soul come from? So, for example, Vision, who is 100% a creation of Tony Stark and AI, does Vision have a soul? I don't know.
Well, they may try to answer that question, or at least address it. Because Vision Quest is another one of those upcoming projects that's been named. So that White Vision character that we saw in WandaVision, presumably is going to go off and ponder, like, what or who is he? Yeah. And Mephisto may show up in that to, like, give his version of the answer.
We'll see. And he's the deceiver, so we'll have to give that the credit it is. Well, and I love that Mephisto is, in the end, kind of the main person behind pulling all the strings here. Not pulling the strings, but, like, influencing it. Because I think what the show did that I most liked, I want to hear your thoughts on this, because you may have had a very different journey with it, but let me just give you my journey with this show. It's because I thought this show did an incredible job of subverting expectations and making the viewer kind of look at their expectations. Because I went into this thinking that Ironheart was going to be a hero. I think without exception, with the possible exception of Agatha, but even she is able to be somewhat heroic, kind of an anti-hero by the end, though still pretty villainous. When Marvel names a TV show or a movie after a character, that character is going to be our hero. And they might very much be an anti-hero, like even like the Punisher or something like that, or a reluctant hero, but they're going to be somewhat heroic. And we start out pretty early with Riri Williams doing a number of things that are illegal. And at first they're like, yeah, she's like helping, she's it's so unfair that she doesn't have the financial resources that someone like a Tony Stark does. She's trying to get those. I totally get it. She's helping other students cheat, but they're the ones who are cheating. She's just facilitating. Is it really that bad? Okay, now she's like robbing people, but she's robbing these like ultra rich people who are doing harmful things. She's helping to beat up a lot of the like rent-a-cop security guards who work for them. Like, there's a number of steps, and then of course, obviously, she is being attacked by a guy, and then in a fight, she kind of gets the upper hand on him. She escapes this room where all the air is going out, and she has a chance to save him while he's been beaten. She decides not to do that and leaves him to die. And where I was wrestling with this, because I was thinking, okay, this is a show that's saying, like a lot of characters, she did some bad stuff in the past, but we're pushing you to see how much of that stuff will you accept that she can still be a hero, even though she's done all that. And I started thinking about the character of Natasha, and how Natasha, we don't actually see a movie about too much of it. We see some of it much later in Black Widow's own movie, but we keep hearing that she has red in her ledger, that she's done some really bad stuff. And I was like, okay, so maybe this is Riri is going to become just as much a hero of any of the other characters, but like them, like Scarlet Witch, she has red in her ledger. But it's okay if I can understand that. If I can understand that, like, Tony Stark wasn't a superhero, but was absolutely a mega criminal and a mass, arms dealer and doing all these horrible things. But I was wrestling with it. I was like, I don't know if I can like there's a lot of decisions she made, especially about the AI, that I really thought were questionable, about how she treats people. And so in the end, when we realize like she faces the moment of temptation where a hero looks into the abyss and has the chance to go into their darkest self, but chooses to rise above it. And she didn't. We don't see the exact details, but she makes some kind of a deal with Mephisto, because by the end, Natalie is back, not as an AI, not as a projection, but seemingly as a fully living, breathing human person. And I was just like, oh my God, this show is so brilliant. Because it was doing it. The show never said, this is going to be a show about a hero. It just made me think it was, because that's... To me, this is a great example of setting up tropes and then playing with them. And kind of pushing the audience to not expect what they would normally expect from this kind of a show. And so it left me like totally rethinking my moral questioning about it all. And be like, oh, this is... I don't think it's a villain origin story necessarily. I think she's probably going to have a hero turn at some point, but definitely not in this season, and that's fantastic, actually.
Yeah, villain origin story, both in the sense that they have finally introduced Mephisto, but the question of Ironheart herself, Riri Williams herself, it's interesting. I don't think that they ever used the name Ironheart. Like they never spoke the name of her alter ego or whatever. So I'm kind of curious why that decision was made.
But a couple of times people say about her, you have a really soft heart or you have a strong heart. And I kept waiting for someone to say you have a heart of iron or something, but yeah, they never do.
And they had the flashback of Iron Head.
Right.
Her stepdad calling her that. But to go back to Mephisto, like that's his power, right? The Spider-Man story, Brand New Day, or actually I think One More Day was the actual story where he changed everything. Spider-Man and Mary Jane make the deal. They too like make the deal with Mephisto to magically dissolve their marriage in order to save Aunt May's life or bring her back to life. I don't know, she might have technically died temporarily. But that's his power, right? He feeds on your grief and your trauma.
Yeah.
And says like, don't you want to change? Like, don't you want to bring this person back who means so much to you? And like, all it will cost is this thing that doesn't seem like it harms anyone, right? Like, it's not like he's asking you to go do terrible things to other people. Right. It's just your soul, or it's just your marriage. And it's unclear like why he cares so much about things like this, like other than just for the sake of being this deceiver and like having like yeah, again, like we don't know what a soul means or does for him.
Yeah, well, and that the tricks, the sort of deceiver trickster thing is interesting. And here, I'm sorry, I'm going to go into a bit of a theology deep dive, but
I mean, this is why why I said like we should talk about this, because you have all this background, and I'm like, I don't know, he's the devil.
So the character of the devil, or of Satan, is one that has a long and rich theological history, and that shifts quite a lot.
Yeah.
Because originally, the word Satan, I'm going to mispronounce this, I apologize, but it derives from an ancient Hebrew word called, that's pronounced, I believe, Hasatan. And that isn't a name, it is a title. It means the accuser. And in most Jewish stories, and this is true, it's primarily Talmudic, but also like literally in the book of Job and other books like that, in the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, and also in the Christian Bible, the character is sometimes like arguing with God, but is very much part of the divine council. He is doing a job that God has ordained for him, or her. I don't think he's ever gendered necessarily. But that Hasatan's job is to basically kind of be a prosecuting attorney. That when mankind stands before God and God has to give final judgment on are individual people or mankind as a whole worthy, that Hasatan is the one to try to argue that they're not. And also to try to say, to tempt them to create situations where they fail in order to show God this creation is not worthy. The character of Q, especially in those first episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, I think you could very much see as the Hasatan character, and also in the last ones, where his role, in his mind, he is both prosecuting attorney and judge and jury, instead of doing it for someone else. But it's that same kind of thing. And so, for example, the whole point of the story of Job, actually is a much deeper issue, but in the version we have now, because the parts about Hasatan are added much later than the original, but in the newer version, but newer I mean like 800 BC as opposed to 1200 BCE, but in that newer version, it's Satan saying to God, Hasatan saying to God, I think that even like your most devout worshiper could fall. That even Job, if I did all these terrible things, all this trauma to him, even he could turn away from you. Mm-hmm. The killing joke, I think, is the exact same kind of story. This idea of that any person on their worst day could make the deal with the devil. So the point of that all being that, of course, by the time that we switch to Christianity, like Christians do, obviously Jews haven't, but now the theology is much more of Lucifer, of the fallen angel, which, by the way, does not appear anywhere in the Bible. It's primarily a creation of Dante, but also of a lot of other sort of earlier Christian theologians who are trying to come up with explanations for the force of evil in the world. That's, again, non-biblical. But here, so it has to be, it can't be a separate devil, because everything has to exist that God existed, that God created, but it has to be something that's against God. So instead of it being like part of God's courtroom, now it's this fallen angel who's working against God. And so why would they do it? To torture men's souls or something like that. So it's interesting to me that here, the Mephisto character does want something from other people, so it's kind of more that Christian idea, but also is existing to test people. Like if because you could kind of see it as maybe that, like, whatever other figure in the cosmology or whatever is saying, like, can Riri Williams be a hero? Mephisto, test them. I don't think that's what's actually happening, but like that's I think that's a result that we're seeing, is that all these characters have to be tested in that moment. I'm running wild here, but yeah, so that's kind of some of the history of the term and the shift. And it's interesting, I think, that we get to see both sides of Mephisto, that he's doing it for his own purposes, but also there's a test in a way that these characters are going through.
Yeah, no, I love all that. I love hearing all this because it puts it so much in the context.
Yeah.
And it helps me understand this character better, who, again, like is one of the top Marvel villains. And yet there's never like an Infinity Gauntlet saga where you defeat Mephisto. Like you defeat Mephisto by turning down his offer. I think is like the only thing, and then he goes away. It's like, oh, okay.
And stopping the people who have accepted his offer or convincing them to take it back or something like that.
Yeah, it's but his offers, it's not. He doesn't make the Hood in the show. He doesn't make the Hood do things.
Yeah.
He's just like, I'm going to give you the tools and you do what you want.
Yeah.
It's up to you. So it could even be like a future for Ironheart is like Mephisto gives her the tools and maybe she doesn't reject the power, but she uses the power more responsibly. And he's like, okay, like if that's your choice, it could be. I don't know. And that's one of the most fascinating things about this is like, we're kind of left wondering, like, is she hero? Is she villain? What is she going to do in the future?
Well, especially because I feel like we have to my mind, there are three characters who are tested, and all three of them to some extent fail the test. And Ironheart is our protagonist, so we see it most from her eyes. And the other two characters are kind of tested more off screen or in the past. But to me, the other two being Parker, aka the Hood, and Joe Xavier slash no, it's not Xavier. It's
Ezekiel,
Zeke, right. All three of them have,
which is a biblical name, right?
Yeah. One of the prophets. All three of them have deep family trauma. One of them, her kind of father died, and then her stepfather and her best friend, or I think her stepsister, were killed in front of her. One, his father was just incredibly cruel and cold and threw him out into the street when he was a young boy, I think 12 years old, they said. And one has this father who was just a horrible, horrible person. But, Obadiah Stane, which, by the way, another great deep cut, back to the first Iron Man movie. But the whole world thinks he's a hero. And so he's dealing with that trauma. And all three, and then he further has the trauma of making a deal with this kid who promises to keep him out of things, utterly fails in that promise, and he gets sent to jail. And he's in a really screwed up situation. And all three of them become this kind of darker version of themselves. I don't know if Mephisto is ever directly connected to Zeke, but it feels like all three of them are in that same place of, at first they look like villains. If we look deeper, we can understand some rationality we can sympathize for them, but also look at the harm they're causing. And with all three, I think we're left in a question of, are they a hero or not? I would say right now, Zeke is kind of the most heroic, because almost all the bad things he's done have been while he's being forced to, with the exception of fighting Riri. But I think even there, he kind of had a good reason to want to fight her, and then he did let her live. I think Riri is kind of the one who's most in the middle, because she's made this deal and we don't know what she's going to do. The Hood is probably the darkest, because he has killed people. He has done some really bad things with the powers that Mephisto was given. But to me, all three are kind of on a very similar journey. It's just they're at different points in the timeline.
Yeah, I think it was very important for these characters, some of the actions that they took or didn't take. As you mentioned, Zeke fights against Riri of his own volition because he's angry. He feels betrayed, rightfully so. But then at the conclusion of the fight, he's won. He's defeated her. She's on the ground. He's tearing her armor off. And he chooses not to kill her, right? Which is the directive he's been given by the Hood. And he very easily could in that moment. And he walks away and says, get out of Chicago. Like, because if the Hood finds out you're still alive, like, I'm going to be in trouble.
Right.
Or you're going to be in trouble. I don't like both. But he lets her go. And then he hides that fact. He lies to the Hood about it. So there is like an inherent, there's a morality in him that is good. He, of course, in the comics, like he very much becomes a super villain, and that could still be his arc. Like I've heard things like about possible future things for him. But even the Hood, at the end, there's a mid or post credits scene where he goes to Zelda Stanton, the sorceress in this story, and as I said, they seem to be setting up Strange Academy, but it's not clear in that scene like what his motivation is, like what he wants to do.
Right.
Like, is he seeking magic just because he wants revenge on Riri? Or, I mean, I think this possibility is open that he is going to try to save her from Mephisto, as she ultimately did for him.
Yeah.
And maybe he's looking for magic in order to be able to challenge Mephisto.
Yeah, and I love how open-ended it is. I love that all of these major characters live. Sometimes I'm a little frustrated by that, but in this case, I like that. Like the entire gang they had, which, by the way, like I kind of love that they were just like, "You're gonna call us woke, whatever we do." So here's a gang of awesome, incredibly smart, incredibly physically capable, and all of them are people of color and/or queer and/or genderqueer of some kind or another. And they were just leaned heavily into that, and it made total sense that this is a group that would work together and that all of them would have these talents and powers. And I just loved that. But all of them lived. They're in an interesting moral place now. Like, I feel like a lot of this is also people are all having to come to terms with what's the moral price of the decisions that I made. And you're right. I don't know where any of them are going to wind up going.
Yeah, like regarding the gang, so one of the characters named Slug, who is their computer hacker character, is played by Shea Coulee, who is a drag queen. I think is very famous in the drag queen community. Like, I don't know anything about them, but I think people are excited in that community. It's like,
oh yeah, their pronouns are she and they, and she's been a big fixture on RuPaul's Drag Race for quite some time, apparently, among other things.
Yeah, there you go. And for me, the point about this gang is that they are all from kind of like underprivileged communities and places. And that's the point of Parker the Hood gathering them, because he thinks of himself as Robin Hood, right? And is like, we are going to steal from the rich and, we're going to enrich ourselves because we are the poor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's more Ocean's 11 than it is Robin Hood, as we kind of discussed at one point, and there's some fun heists that they do. And a couple of things I want to go here, but first let me just ask a question about Mephisto, because there was one thing that was bothering me through the show, and I don't know if this is like some sloppy writing or some incredibly good writing. There was a number of things that I just felt like it didn't make sense to me that they would get away with it. Things like MIT knows exactly that that what that suit is, and that Riri Williams stole that suit. They turn off her tech at one point, and the suit is clearly seen at a number of these crime scenes. So the fact that like no one puts that together felt a little weird to me. Going in and putting people in very like gun against your head situations and then getting them to sign contracts. No judge in the world is going to honor a contract like that, because all the person has to do is tell them, hey, I signed it under duress, and the contract's immediately void, especially when they notice that 4 different people have all come forward saying, hey, this one guy who now owns a part of our company through his contract, he did it to all of us. There was just a number of things like that didn't seem to make any sense to me. And I was like, I wish she'd done more to like connect those dots. But as I got to the end, my question is this. In some stories, the devil trickster character has actually been helping the person a lot before they actually meet, and is able to say like, hey, you didn't do all this on your own. You remember when the cops somehow totally didn't figure out it was you? That was because of me. I've been helping you, and I can continue to help you. And
yes.
Does Mephisto do that? Because that would be a way I could headcanon a lot of the stuff that didn't feel like it was well written to me. And I don't know if I'm giving Mephisto and the writers too much credit or not enough.
So regarding the contract, like the legality of these contracts, the Hood forces CEOs to sign contracts that give him lots of money or percentages of their companies, like controlling interest in their companies. And you're right. Like, if you walked into like a tech CEO's office with a gun and said, sign this contract that gives me control of your company, they can sign it, but like you don't own that company, because as soon as you try to do anything, the court's gonna be like, no, like you had a gun. It's not, I don't believe it was explicitly stated or even implied with anything. I believe that those contracts are probably magical, right? Like that they're kind of like Mephisto paper or whatever, and it's enforced by magic somehow, because that's kind of the only thing that makes sense.
Which would make sense, because obviously I don't know if this is true of Mephisto specifically, but in a lot of fiction, the devil figure makes you sign a contract, you know, and often you don't get a chance to read it and things like that. So, okay, that explanation would definitely line up then, and that would make some sense for me.
And that could very well be projection headcanon. But I feel like once you find out it's Mephisto, you're kind of like, okay, contracts, like, checks out.
Yeah.
The other part, I also clocked, like, why doesn't anyone notice? First off, I was like, why is she even on this team doing this? Like, the job, a lot of the stuff she's doing, like, flying around, like, that could just be a drone, right?
Yeah.
You could just have a drone with a camera, because that's all she was doing, is, like, watching people from above. What I will say about her, what you said about protection, right, from Mephisto beforehand, I think the character of Natalie, the AI character that we experienced throughout the show, was created by Mephisto.
Oh.
Because when she's created, Riri says, I don't know how this happened. Like, I was doing the brain scan and fell asleep, and then Natalie was there, like this, and you know, the tech side of Marvel would be like, you can't, like, this isn't how you make AI, like that's not possible, right? So again, like, there's no direct implication, like it's not like her laptop like lights up with magic while she's asleep, so we don't know. But I think it makes a lot of sense if the Natalie AI was created by Mephisto, as you said, to help her magically through this journey, but to tempt her, right? Because the final temptation is, don't you want the real Natalie to be alive again? And by creating this AI that has been her companion, it reminds her. And she's like, yeah, like I love this, like hanging out with Natalie thing. And that's the temptation in the end. So I think it makes a lot of sense.
Oh, I really like that.
If that AI is Mephisto created, it's both an aid potentially to like smooth things over, but mostly to tempt Riri in the end.
That I love, because I'll admit I had a couple of logical problems with the Natalie AI, and I'll get to in a second. But also, like, clearly one of the things that Mephisto deals with, he comes to people in their weakest moments, in the moments when they're most likely, and grief is one of them. And what he winds up doing through the AI, like, I often like ideas of like that the evil character, maybe it's a master manipulator, maybe it's the devil, or maybe it's someone else, that they can anticipate what's going to happen. They're not controlling everyone. They just can anticipate what everyone's going to do, and so they're acting accordingly. And so the idea, because I think, you know, it's never explicitly said, but the clear idea, I think, is like, in some way I was a little frustrated that Zelma can't figure out what happened to the AI, because she said it. There's going to be a great cost to magic. And so the cost of magic in the suit is that we lose the AI. And so if Mephisto did all this, knowing that would probably happen, knowing that, and that would mean that Riri would have to lose Natalie a second time and be re-traumatized. Because the whole time that with the Natalie thing, two things I was thinking about. One was probably a little silly. One was kind of like, wait a minute. You're already telling me that she's able to have the suit without the arc reactor because it's solar and wind powered.
That was kind of BS.
I'm raising a big eyebrow at that, but I'm like, fine. If I can accept an arc reactor, I can accept that too. But like, literally, when every day we're getting a story about how ChatGPT requires the power of like Belgium in order to function, and you're telling me, but like, you can do a whole Natalie. But even again, it's the MCU. You should put all that aside. But the thing I was kind of waiting for was, and this is again a very metaphysical thing, but I thought a really interesting one to ponder. Like, if someone scans my brainwaves to make an AI of you, what they're going to make is an AI of my understanding of you.
Yeah.
And granted, you and me are nowhere near as close as, like, you know, Riri and Natalie are. But like, still, it's what Riri knows of Natalie. And obviously there's a whole bunch of Natalie that Riri doesn't know. And I was kind of looking forward to, and they went in a different direction with this, obviously, but I was looking forward to when Natalie would meet Xavier, because Xavier probably sees a different side of Natalie that Riri doesn't see. Mm-hmm. And so Xavier kind of clocking that, being like, this isn't Natalie, this is Natalie from your brainwaves and your memories and stuff like that. And even I was thinking like, but even Riri might think that, because like, you know, my knowledge of you isn't totally fixed. You get to surprise me. You say things that I don't expect you to say. In the same way that like all the stuff about the biblical origins of Hasatan, if you were making an AI of me, it wouldn't do that because you wouldn't know that already. Where I'm going with all this is it just felt like that part of the AI also didn't make sense. So having it actually be Mephisto, it's like, okay. It's one more way in which the writers subverted my expectations. They expected me to doubt it. This all makes sense. I'm in. I'm totally down for this now.
Yeah, for me, like after I finished the show, I was like, I wonder if that's what was happening, because the whole time with the AI, Riri saying like, I don't know how this happened, so it makes sense to me. And then like as you said, the AI Natalie going away when they power her new suit with magic could be Mephisto just turning her off.
Yep.
Or it could be like conflicting magic
and
overwriting the old magic
right
in some way. And again, I don't, after the first watch, I don't think there was a single thing that is like a hint or a suggestion that this was the case. But it's very possible, like on a rewatch, once you go in with a mindset of, I'm going to look for clues that Natalie is somehow Mephisto created or influenced. Right. There might be a lot of like Sixth Sense type hints going on.
No, I think it's very true. And it would also make sense in that, what's the name of the character that Jonathan Majors was playing that was going to be like the next big bad until Jonathan Majors turned out to be a pretty terrible person and got scrapped from it all?
Kang the Conqueror.
Kang the Conqueror, thank you. I think that's one where the actions of Kang in the Loki show made more sense once you'd seen him in some of the other stuff that he wound up being in. I think Quantumania especially. And so, I think there's a track record of like, they're not giving us all of who Mephisto is, and Mephisto will appear in other things, and that will wind up being that will help us better understand what happened in Ironheart. And I'm totally down for that.
Yeah.
I think we shouldn't know everything about him.
Just think about the WandaVision experience. And of the YouTubers and podcasters who are like, it's Mephisto. Like, here are all the clues. And none of them were real, right? They were all projections and invented in our heads, or just like vague clues that weren't directly Mephisto, but could be interpreted that way.
Mm-hmm.
So now you have a show where there's actual Mephisto. They must like the only one I noticed was like early on, like episode 2 or 3. They're standing in front of like a construction fence, and there's a bunch of posters behind them that say Faust, right? And the Faustian bargain. And that was a pretty obvious one. So I was kind of like, yeah, I think that's a Mephisto clue. But I'll bet there's a lot more. And I'll bet like the dialogue with Natalie and Riri will make a lot more sense if you assume.
Just for those who don't know, Faust is another name for the devil, or sometimes like a servant of the devil, a demon or something like that, who offers people one of these, like, I'll do all this for you if you just give me your soul. And that's often referred to as a Faustian bargain.
I thought he was the person who made the deal with the devil.
Oh, you may be right. Okay.
It's a Dr. Faust, right? Or is that...
it may be one of those things like Frankenstein, where like today we see the monster and we go, oh, that's Frankenstein, when it's actually the doctor. I think Faust is now used as a name for the devil, but actually I think you're right. I'll look up what's that from, because I don't think it's the Screw Tape Letters, but what is?
I think it's like a novel or a play.
Yeah, it's from like the Middle Ages, I think. Okay, Faust is the protagonist of a classic German legend, or originating somewhere between 1480 and 1540. The erudite Faust is he's the one who makes the deal with the devil. You're correct. And it happens at a crossroads, which obviously becomes a big part of the legend as well. Anyway, that was a deep dive that was not necessary, but go on.
Well, no, I mean, like, that was one, like, visually, it was very easy to notice if you were just, like, watching. And of course, like, it's easy to miss, too. But I think, like, Riri's bedroom just has lots of stuff. Like, it's a classic kid's room with, like, posters and stickers on the wall and all kinds of trinkets and doodads. And people have combed that and they found lots of interesting things, but that was before the finale, before we knew that it's actually Mephisto. So I think if you go over it again, I don't know. I feel like a show like this, once you know you have this character, you have fun with it. And you just like put it all in the background.
Well, especially because now in headcanon, this can be used to explain any and every plot hole we've ever had.
Yeah. I don't love that part of it.
I don't love that part, but I do like... Because I think one of the elephants in the room here is that this show, like a lot of other shows, got... this show, like a lot of other shows that are spearheaded by people of color or queer characters or others like that, often with people of color casts and writers and directors or queer writers and directors, etc., hit a lot of negative reviews. It got review bombed even before it came out. A lot of people really didn't like it. And then there's been a lot of people since then, especially if you've only seen those first 3 episodes, who did a lot of the stuff that I was talking about of like, oh, this doesn't make sense, who felt like they were holding Riri to a very high standard of like, oh, she's a terrible person. Look at these things she does. Oh, this character doesn't make sense. Look at all these things that they're saying the science does. And it's stuff that I was pointing out, but it's stuff that I don't think that those are logic holes any bigger than what happens in most Iron Man movies or Thor or Hulk or any of them. All of them require a suspension of disbelief and some degree of laughing with your friends about, okay, yeah, that didn't make sense, but who cares? It looked cool. And so I don't love the idea of, you're right, of it being a way to close every plot hole, but I do think that we can, if we now know that that is a thing that happens, I think we can look at, were there times where other characters were able to do things seemingly out of nowhere, and maybe Mephisto was involved? Did Mephisto have anything to do with that box of scraps that Tony finds? Like, I don't know. I'm not saying that he does by any means, but I think that the writers did something very interesting by giving this specifically to a show about a black woman that was going to be disparaged and hated by an awful lot of people based on that fact alone. Giving us one of the most important pieces of the MCU lore, so now everyone's got to watch it who didn't want to watch it. I mean, they might not, but it's a nice way to hook people in. But also kind of introducing this idea of, yeah, maybe she did all this because she got help from Mephisto. And you know what? Maybe a lot of other characters did too. We just didn't see it.
Right. That's one of the things in the conversation she has that he implies, or he could be lying. Like, he could always be lying. That's the thing. But he implies that he has deals with, I think he said, the top 100 on the Forbes wealthiest list or whatever. 14 kings, 3 popes. And then he name drops Ringo Starr, which is one of those like funny digs at him. Yeah. Look, as a Beatles fan, I recognize that Ringo Starr is not the strongest singer of the 4. He's not the strongest songwriter, but he was a great drummer. And maybe like he's implying that he gave him those drumming skills, but like he
want to live in an
octopus's
octopus's garden. I'm down with some Ringo Starr.
Ringo Starr deserved to be there. He deserved to be acknowledged as a rock and roll great. So I will not stand for this disparagement. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and one
but
thing
maybe implying that the devil gave him the powers and that's why he's great. I don't know, right?
He says that all 100 of the people on the Forbes list have made a deal with him.
Yeah.
In earlier MCU properties, movies especially, we have seen both Tony Stark and Pepper Potts on the cover of Forbes.
Sure.
Now you can argue that he's saying about it right now, and those people are dead, or they're gone, or they're no longer part of the Forbes list or whatever. So it's not definite proof, but I think it raises some of these questions.
Yeah.
It also raises another thing that I think where, again, the show does something that at first kind of makes you raise your eyebrow, but actually, if you fully understand it, makes sense. There's a part of me that was kind of a little bothered by, are we really going to see that the white middle class guy who came up with a horrible father, but in much better circumstances than our other two characters were tempted, in terms of Xavier, that he's able to resist the temptation that both the Hood, Parker, and to some extent, and Riri are not able to resist.
He's able to resist, right?
Zeke, sorry, yeah. That Zeke is more able to resist, not entirely, but more able. But remember also where Riri starts, that Tony Stark had it easier because he had all of this money and all these resources. And all of the moral choices that she makes stem from the fact that she's trying to get the moral resource. She's trying to get the financial resources that Tony Stark already had. And even in Tony Stark's case, he has them in part because of his father, but he also has them in part because he is making and giving out the weapons, selling the weapons that are able to be used in Sokovia and Afghanistan and all these other places where they do terrible harm. And if you ask me, helping a bunch of students in Boston cheat is a lot better way to make money than selling weapons, in terms of which one is more ethical. And obviously I'm painting in very broad strokes here. I'm just saying I think it would be easy to look at it as, why is the white guy the one who is more able to resist the temptation? And I don't think the story's doing it at all. I think it's saying that Ezekiel is a different character than the other two, but his middle class, upper middle class upbringing, he has obviously access to huge financial resources that places him in a very different situation that maybe makes those choices easier for him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know that Zeke had any direct interaction with Mephisto, right? Mm-hmm. He interacted through the Hood, and the Hood was the one who was controlling him physically. So yeah, I don't know that he's been tempted necessarily.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. I think it's kind of like any Jedi can fall to the dark side, but having Palpatine specifically try to turn you to the dark side is a much higher. I definitely think that, to me, he does have a couple of will I turn to the dark side moments, but he never encounters Palpatine directly.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with you on that.
I do want to go back to what you were talking about in terms of comparing Riri Williams to Tony Stark.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have seen these discussions of the Tony Stark built this on a curve, and whether it's realistic for her to be able to build all of these suits.
Right.
And that's just a conceit of the fiction, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can either accept it or not. But it's also, I believe in the comics, Riri Williams is supposed to be smarter than Tony
mm-hmm.
Stark, for one thing. That's what she is. Accept that or not. And of course, some people can't accept that. But we're also in a universe that has benefited from Tony Stark's knowledge and expertise for 15, 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's she is building upon what he has already done.
Right.
And it's computer programmers in the 1990s were a lot better than computer programmers in the 1970s. And the tech was better and easier to access and replicate and all of that. That's just how things work.
And she's gotten to hang out with Shuri from Wakanda and spend a lot of time with Wakanda tech, which is something else that is incredibly technologically advanced that Tony Stark never had access to.
I'm sure she peeked at a few schematics and took notes.
Yeah. It does make me wonder why she doesn't turn to Wakanda for funding, but I'm sure that's a whole other story. And I don't remember the exact details of her ending her time.
There was they tried to hand wave that.
Yeah.
I don't think it was for the funding, but for help defeating the Hood.
Right.
She had a conversation with Natalie and was I can't call her up with this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, okay, they're acknowledging it. I don't necessarily need every show to acknowledge why the Avengers aren't showing up for this crisis.
Sometimes to me that part was fine. It was more the why can't you get a grant from them?
Yeah.
But again, it's a tiny thing. I feel like I have questions like that about every single Marvel property because it's involving superpowers and super tech. It's not always going to make total sense, and that's okay.
Yeah, I like those are discussions that happen. Like those are questions that fans have about her and why she doesn't work with Wakanda,
Yeah.
why she doesn't work with Stark Enterprises, or a bunch of other things. And I don't like ultimately like I do find myself falling back on this often that
Mm-hmm.
this is her story.
Yeah.
And if you bring in Shuri and the Wakandans, it becomes less her story.
Yeah.
And you can see like examples of that in other like Captain America Brave New World was supposed to be Sam Wilson's story, his
Mm-hmm.
movie. And they brought in like way too much Hulk stuff into
Yeah.
that. And people were like, why isn't this a Hulk movie? And it made in my opinion, like it made that movie so much weaker and so much like less about Sam that it was very disappointing.
Yeah.
So I came to this show for the Riri Williams story, and I feel like I got that, and I'm
Yeah.
very happy with it.
I'm in agreement with you there. And I think, like, when we encounter folks who are arguing, I think, in bad faith, I think there's two ways to respond to it. One is to say, no, I can explain away everything you're claiming as a plot hole. And I think it's somewhat possible, especially with
Now you can just say Mephisto.
Mephisto of it all. But I think I'd rather go in another direction, which is to say, look, every single property that we talk about has plot holes like this because
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense. I think Star Wars: A New Hope is one of the greatest movies ever made, perhaps the best, like, you know, science fiction-y, science opera, space kind of movie ever made. I think The Trench Run is one of the most exciting, beautifully shot, incredible pieces of cinema I've ever seen. It makes absolutely no sense. There's no reason why they couldn't just fly directly at that hole in the ship. All the like the ships chasing them behind them makes no sense. Like, and I don't want to get into that argument now, but like when we love something, we automatically cover up the holes in it in our heads because we're loving it. And I've been talking to them about Thor that I think sometimes if something isn't very good, it makes it harder to suspend that disbelief. But I also think that when you approach a property from a place of bad faith and looking for reason not to like it, guess what? Again, you're not going to be able to suspend your disbelief. You're just going to focus on those problems. So,
Yeah, the Star Wars thing I find fascinating because I had this discussion with some Andor fans
mm-hmm.
where they had some nitpicks about the show Andor. And some other people were like, "Oh, like why are you so negative? Like why are you so focused on these details that don't matter?"
Yeah.
But ultimately, if you go back through the history of Star Wars, the reason we have the wonderful show Andor is because of Rogue One, and the reason we have Rogue One is because there's this huge glaring, I don't know if you call it a plot hole, but like logical phallus inconsistency
Mm-hmm.
in why does the Death Star have this ridiculous weakness? And
Right.
that was like pointed out in the Kevin Smith movie, right? Where
Yeah.
they're as fans are discussing this thing. And so like fans discussing plot holes and problems, I think is fine.
Yeah.
And it can lead to amazing things down the line when the creators like come back around and try to address it. But as
Galaxy
you said, like
Quest.
don't do it in bad faith and don't just
Yeah.
like trash something because it has this plot hole and it's terrible. Everything has plot holes, and if you
Yeah.
don't enjoy it, like that's fine. But I think like this show does have flaws, but
Mm-hmm.
I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm so glad like we had this discussion because as soon as Mephisto showed up, I was like, well,
Yeah.
I think this is it. We got to talk about this.
Well, the whole time I was watching, I was like, oh, there's so much morality in the show. And like to me, it was especially the moment where people decide that it's okay for her to keep the AI of Natalie. Because I just didn't agree with that. I thought, I don't think it's psychologically good for you. I think you're being stuck in this moment of grief and you're never allowing yourself, because as the brother pointed out, she's not going to age. You're not, that character, like the AI can learn, but like it's not the same. And also like it's horribly traumatizing to the other people in their lives.
Yeah, when her mother first encounters her, and she says, she asks Riri, "Can you make one of Gary, her husband, Riri's stepdad?" Like that was heartbreaking, and I didn't feel like they let that sit long enough
Mm-hmm.
because it was such a powerful moment. And then Riri's just like, no, I can't, because again, like she doesn't know how it happened. So
Yeah.
it's like, oh, okay, I guess that's fine. And I really would have loved that scene to maybe be a little longer.
I can see that. I on the one hand, I feel like I get why people are like, why is this only 6 episodes? Why wasn't it 8 or 10? But I also think I needed it to all be out within a week, because I think the longer it had stretched out, the more we were having to sit with, is this character really our hero while they were doing all these bad things? I think that I think the discussion would have become incredibly toxic. Not only just from the bad faith, but I think like, I like when something, I'll give you an example. I love when I'm having problems with something and I wonder why don't the writers have the same problem? But I get to the end and it's like, oh no, the writers did have that same problem. They were setting that up. But that is hard to do over a long time scale. So for example, big spoilers, for Star Trek Discovery, the first season of it, which is like 8 or 10 years ago by now, it was marketed as having, among other things, an Asian captain, played by Michelle Yeoh, phenomenal Asian actress. She dies in the pilot. And I think a lot of people were really pissed off about that because they felt like it is great to have this black woman as the lead of a Star Trek show, but we were told it was going to have an Asian character, and she got killed off. She got fridged, kind of. Not exactly. It's a very gender thing normally, but in some regard. And then after episode 10 or so, they did bring her back, and it was all part of a plot thing where they were never planning to have her stay dead, and it gave her a phenomenal character, which in the movie Section 66, whatever it was, utterly ruined. That's another
31.
Story. 61, thank you.
31.
31. I thought it was 51. And it doesn't matter anyway. This isn't a Star Trek podcast. But like I think because it went on too long. And so a lot of people, even though they put out something being like, no, don't worry, trust us. And so I would have liked a lot more content from this show, but I also think it had to have a fairly short runtime. I think if it had done episode once a week for over 6-8 weeks, the reaction to it would have been very different.
Yeah, I strangely I agree. Like I've been very much on the I don't like these 6-episode quote unquote TV shows because I feel like they're just movies that get cut up.
Yeah.
Into episodes, like in terms of runtime, like this probably could have been a movie and it would have been fine. So yeah, like the way that I watched this, like I think that did add to my enjoyment. I felt like the first episode was the weakest, and if that had been released just one episode and then I have to wait a week for episode 2, I honestly don't know if I would have kept with it. Because I didn't really enjoy the first episode that much, and I wasn't truly engaged. So getting 3 at once and watching that, I was like, okay, like I'm interested in this. I was a little disappointed to find out that was the halfway point, and we were only getting 3 more. But I think it was satisfying, and it worked.
Yeah. And I will say, I was almost really done in by this, and we almost screwed up the episode. Or I almost screwed up the episode. Happily, it worked out because I woke up early. Maybe Mephisto woke me up early. I don't know. But because I knew that the first 3 episodes were out. And then you told me you'd finished watching it last night. We're recording this, by the way, on July 3rd. The second half only came out yesterday. And I thought what you meant was that you'd finished watching those first 3 episodes. So I watched those 3 episodes last night. And then I noticed that it had... I watched episode 1 last night. My plan was to wake up and have enough time to watch episodes 2 and 3. As it happened... I woke up very early, watched episodes 2 and 3, and then saw that it went to episode 4. And I thought it was on we're dropping 3 episodes to start, but then it'll be episode 4 1 week, episode 5 1 week, episode 6. So I actually messaged you asking, hey, should I watch episode 4, or are we only discussing episodes 1, 2, and 3? I then happily looked into it, and because I'd woken up early, had enough time, I was like, oh, never mind. I deleted that message to you, watched all 6 episodes. But yeah, I do wonder if there's a lot of people who don't realize like the whole show is out already. Hopefully none of you listening to this because we gave all these warnings. But
well, that's actually very lucky. I saw the messages from you, but then didn't see anything. So it makes sense that you deleted them. I still had like the notification, the red number notification. I was like, what's going on here? But yeah, that's very lucky that you got up early and you noticed that and watched it all because like this has been For a show that I had no expectations, possibly even negative expectations, I had a great time watching it. Like it's not top tier, but especially for Marvel, for me there have been a lot more misses recently.
Yeah.
So this was like a relief, especially on the television side.
Yeah.
And then getting to discuss the Mephisto of it all and getting your perspective on the theology and the history of like the real Satan has been fantastic, Matthew. Like I'm so glad we got to do this.
I'm very glad. Very glad. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's definitely it was a rough watch for me at some points because I just didn't know where they were going, but I found it really rewarding. And to me, it did the two things that I think a good MCU project should do in terms of sucking me into the whole MCU. A, I'm now really excited to watch it again because I think knowing what I know, it's going to feel like a totally different show.
Yeah,
and I will see like, oh look, there's Mephisto, and there's that influence, and there's the word Faust and all this kind of stuff. But also, like I think we've talked before about how a lot of MCU properties felt like they had like Avengers: Age of Ultron. I think is one of the worst examples of this, where there are scenes that don't feel to fit that movie, but are just there to set up the upcoming individual movies for some of the other characters. And I think there's been a lot of other stuff in Marvel where you're like, the movie did this thing to set up some other movie that's coming out, but it didn't really feel to fit. This makes me super excited for upcoming Marvel stuff in a way I hadn't been beforehand, because now I want to see more of the Mephisto of it all. But it felt like it was very organic to this story. It didn't feel tacked on. It didn't feel forced. And that's a hard thing to do, and I really give it credit for doing that.
Yeah, I mean, they are, as I mentioned, they are obviously setting up Strange Academy is the most obvious one. And there's questions of where Ironheart will end up. You know, will she be an Avenger? Will she be, because she's younger, will she be a young Avenger / champion? Like the thing that Kamala Khan is setting up with.
I think in her kind of morally gray state, she could be a Thunderbolt.
Well, yeah. A new Avenger.
Yeah.
But I also would just like to see her be a part of a superhero team.
Yeah.
And do superhero things, because like ultimately her motivation is to save lives, right? That's her explanation of why she builds the suit, is that
she wanted to help EMT worker and firefighters and stuff like that. Yeah,
she's upset by the drive-by shooting of her stepdad and Natalie, and says if the EMTs could have gotten there sooner, if they had this suit.
Which is very significant, because she's not saying she wants the police to have been able to fight back against that drive-by. She's just saying, like, she's kind of like, the drive-by happened, it was terrible, but she's not trying to fight. She wants the EMTs to get there faster to have saved Natalie and Gary.
Yeah. And so I think it's very believable that she will end up on a superhero team. I don't see her as a villain in the standard sense, but she's going to have this Mephisto thing hanging over her in whatever capacity. And will he come to collect in some way?
That's why I said Thunderbolts, because I think Thunderbolts did a very good job of being like, these are all morally gray characters, you know? And I do agree with you about the saving lives thing. I think even when she's, you know, you could say that maybe the most heartless thing she does is leaving John to die, although he had been very much out to kill her immediately beforehand. But like, that's not a decision she takes lightly, and she's haunted by it for the rest of the show, because it's so against what she wants to do. So yeah, I think she'll definitely wind up a hero, but I like that we're not getting there immediately. That she didn't make her hero turn in the show.
And remember that when she is broken up about in her eyes that she killed him.
Right.
Natalie, the AI, is the one who's there telling her, no, that was self-defense. Right. So again, like, is that the Mephisto influence trying to push her in a certain direction?
Oh yeah.
I don't know. Like you said, like this, I gotta watch this again at some point because of the now that you know.
Yeah.
Like look for the clues aspect of it.
Yeah.
And I think it will be a good second watch because of that, and for so many other things. I think the performances in this were great. I don't even know if you said his name, but Alden Ehrenreich, my Han Solo, was Zeke Stain. And I just want to acknowledge, like, we've talked about, Black creators in this space, especially this geek space. I want to acknowledge a name. Chinaka Hodge is the creator of the show, the showrunner, I guess is what you call her. She worked on Snowpiercer TV series, I guess, and a show called The Midnight Club, which I enjoyed but has been canceled. So there's that. But
Mike Flanagan show, which she's very involved in.
Yeah, but I think like this worked. Very promising career. Like, let's see what she's got next. Like, bring her up, Marvel. Like, give her the next thing.
Yeah, there was so much. There were so many people who were like. There's a couple of Hamilton actors who were in this. I believe the I don't have the names in front of me, unfortunately, but the actor who played
Anthony Ramos, right?
Anthony Ramos, thank you. Yeah, he played Parker, aka the Hood, who did a phenomenal acting job. He's from Hamilton, as is the guy who played Stewart, Rampage. I think
Eric Andre.
Yeah, he's doing a lot of comedy stuff. Yeah, never mind. But a very well known, very very good comedian. Not well known, but he should be. Yeah, all the acting, I think. Ehrenreich is not my Han Solo, but I instantly recognized the voice. Like, I kept being like, how do I place that? Who is this person? And I didn't realize it was him until I looked it up. But yeah, phenomenal acting performance by him. And the sorry, I should look this up. Who plays? And Dominique Thorne as Riri Williams, who I think we'd seen in Black Panther 2, and she was fine in that, but I don't think she had much to do, but I thought she was phenomenal in this. I really got so much of her complex, nuanced character from her performance.
She had...
Excuse me.
Dominique had a couple of amazing scenes where she basically had to have a panic attack breakdown.
Yeah.
And it was believable. And I felt for her. I felt for the character. So yeah, I think she did a great job. One of the startling things about this cast is the Zelma Stanton character is played by Reagan Aaliyah, and I'm looking at the Wikipedia page. She doesn't even have a link on Wikipedia, so I don't know anything. Like, is this her first role? I think she did a great job. If she's like a centerpiece of the Strange Academy, well, I think it'll be great. So yeah, like top to bottom, I felt like there were, the young kid with the wagon who helps her, I thought
that was a little eye-rolling.
Probably, but again, like a very young actor, so like I'm not gonna overly criticize. Like it was a fine enough performance, and it's not an important character, so like it doesn't really matter.
Oh, I didn't think the acting was bad. I thought it was a badly written character, but yeah.
Either way, like if that's your weakest character, then I think you got a strong show.
Yeah. Also note, just as we're naming names, the characters created by the characters created by Brian Michael Bendis, who is among the things the creator of Miles Morales. So two good things come from that. So, and Ryan Coogler. I don't know exactly how Ryan Coogler was involved in this, but he's listed like the two studios that made this are credited as Marvel and Ryan Coogler. And someone who I believe is part of his family. I don't know if he's a sister or wife or something like that, but is also in the producer credits. So,
I see a name, Zinzi Coogler.
Right. Riki, there's been a great discussion. Thank you so much for bringing this up. We've gone a while, but I think hopefully we'll get a lot of feedback. We're probably going to still be on hiatus, but I'm going to try and put this one out pretty soon, so you can listen to it while the discussion is fresh. Let us know what you think. Ask us questions. We'll definitely get into it more. You can join us on our Discord. Link is going to be in the show notes. You can find us on Twitter, social media, all those places. Or just go to our website, theethicalpanda.com. or superheroethics.com. That'll take you there. That'll have all the show information, all the ways to contact us. We'll continue the discussion there. On behalf of myself and Riki, thank you all so much. May the Force be with you.
Dost thou